It's been a really eventful week in the news, and commentators have been running around trying to explain what's going on. The big story was President Trump's tariffs and what the Wall Street Journal called the dumbest trade war ever. He started off on over the past weekend levying a 25% tariff on Canada and Mexican exports that become imports into the US, also 10% on China. Since the Chinese have not really responded, they're weighing their options, but the tariffs on both Canada and Mexico have been suspended. Uh, Ostensibly, it was about the flow of drugs into the US and that he wanted these countries to put more effort into stemming that flow of fentanyl. But what's happened since is maybe a bit less clear. Maybe it was never a trade war. It certainly doesn't seem like it was about bringing US manufacturing jobs back to the homeland. And I think it was maybe a show of power. Maybe the president wanted to show what he's able to do to friends and foes, and in that way position himself in the global politics. Added to that, South Africa also popped up on his radar, and he made a social media post about groups of people being treated badly in South Africa, possible human rights violations, all very vague stuff, but we realized he alluded to the signing into law of the expropriation bill. And for a while there, both the exchange rate and the JSE struggled, lost some value, but it's recovered since. It also seems like the waters have been calmed. There was a call between the president and Elon Musk, and life is going on as usual. I think there's a lesson there for commentators. Not to be too quick to try and interpret what's going on. We're in for 4 really interesting years, and uncertainty is clearly the name, and chaos is the game. So we'll see what happens. In the news from the real economy, there were some high-frequency indicators of economic activity in January, specifically Purchasing Managers Index data. So APSA and the Bureau of Economic Research's Purchasing Managers Index came out. They track manufacturers, and their index is down for the 3rd month in a row. And it sort of reflects the loss of momentum that they saw at the end of 2024, spilling over into January. And Purchasing Managers Indices foretell what happens to production and sales. The broader S&P Global PMI was also lower, showing some weakness in the economy. And this presents a challenge to economists and forecasters, because there are lots of optimistic forecasts for economic growth in South Africa this year, ranging from 1.6% to 2%, which is not high, but a lot higher than we've been having over the past few years. There seems to be a lot of optimism for growth, but a slow start, at least on the side of PMIs and high-frequency indicators, and we'll have to see how this economy gets going to achieve growth rates like that. Then in other interesting economics news, Statistics South Africa updated the items and the weights of the CPI basket. So they don't survey all goods and services to determine the inflation rate. They have a specific basket that the average South African consumes. And they updated this based on data from the 2023 Income and Expenditure Survey, which is the first one since 2015. So they did update the weights in between, but now we get a picture of how South Africans are living post-pandemic. So there are some interesting things in there. Ready-made meals didn't used to be part of the CPI basket, but it's included now. And they've excluded tinned vegetables. So people are just eating less tinned vegetables, and they're not going to measure that price anymore for inflation purposes. The new basket also speaks to the role of technology and how the world is changing. So something like landlines, paying for your post office box, TV decoders, they've been dropped from the CPI basket and replaced by other items. For example, streaming services. Mobile phones have been in there for a while, and refills for e-cigarettes are now part of the CPI basket, where they didn't used to be. There are loads of other interesting examples. Legos are in now, but razor blades are out, so more beards around. So taking it all into account, These new items and the new weights will form part of the January inflation numbers that we're due to see in February. On a final point, the President is delivering the State of the Nation address this evening to Parliament, and there's a big expectation from economists that he will talk more about the reform process that is ongoing, maybe try and indicate where there's some momentum, how the processes are going on, and they really expect more detail on what's happening at Eskom and with its debt burden, and also everybody else who owns Eskom, how they're making progress with recovering those monies. The role of the private sector in Transnet is another big one. Water services get mentioned frequently, and then we know that Operation Vulindlela is part of a process of looking at local government finances and local service delivery. So these commentators are looking for signs there that the process of reform is ongoing, that it's picking up speed, and that's the basis for talking about increased investor confidence and increased economic growth later in the year. At a time like this, many people are making different calls. The IMF, for example, talked about a two-tier reform system that they have in mind. They mentioned first-generation reforms, and that's basically tackling corruption, petty corruption and grand-scale corruption, and making government and governance more effective and efficient. They said this will lay the base for second-generation reforms that would decrease the cost of doing business and improve the competitiveness of the economy. And there they specifically talk about labor market reforms, the way that collective bargaining works, etc. From that side, labor unions have already said they want more employment in the public sector and an end to the austerity measures that we've seen in the past number of budgets. They want more government spending, and looking forward to some of that in the SONA. Personally, I would like to see a hard-hitting PowerPoint presentation where the president goes through all these plans and talks about all the progress being made, but that's not what the SONA is about. Unfortunately, SONAs are also not known for talking about the opportunity cost of the choices we are implicitly making. Economics 101 would tell you that our wants are unlimited, but our resources are scarce, and when that happens, you have to make choices. And the moment you start making choices, there are some things that you don't have, that you have to sacrifice. And that is called the opportunity cost. So in our case, there really isn't enough money to extend grants to the scale that was recently indicated in a court decision, and also pay for the NHI. We can't do both. We can't spend more on education and spend more on the army. And aside from those sort of spending items, lots of people would like to see more spending, but they also want relief from VAT. They also want a lower fuel price, which those levies and taxes makes it possible to do the spending. So in that sense, the president maybe should make these choices more clear. Inherently, there's nothing right or wrong about choosing one or the other, but we need to be sure what we're choosing and what we're sacrificing when we're heading down a specific path. Even in politics, he will find it increasingly difficult to please both the radical factions of his party and keep the GNU together. There's an opportunity cost there as well. And maybe we can't stay friends with Iran and be part of the AGOA agreement. These big, large-scale policy choices that really is all about the direction of where the society and the economy is heading needs to be debated. And I think we'll be much closer to a social compact if we get clarity on the fact that we can't be everything for everyone. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. Please like, share, comment, and tune in to the Economics Weekly soon.